Hi, my name is Kiara Bradley. This is my PVAMU Podcast, and today we're going to be going over the history of Prairie View A&M's ROTC program. So today, the things we're going to be going over in my podcast are going to be the origin of the ROTC program, wars that shaped the history of it, important figures and people that affected the ROTC program, a timeline of events, as well as interviews with current staff and faculty. The origin of the ROTC at Prairie View actually was one of the first HBCUs to have an Army ROTC program. Prairie View was established in 1918, right before World War I ended, while the Naval program wasn't established until much later in 1968, after World War II in the middle of Vietnam War. However, military tactic courses were actually added to the curriculum here at PV in 1878 due to a land grant given to schools who taught military tactics and evolution. And Prairie View, because of that, was one of the first HBCUs to have a senior division in infantry. So that's interesting. Different wars that shaped the history. So we have four main wars that shaped the history of not only the world, but also the ROTC program and how it was brought about in Prairie View. The Civil War obviously was way before the ROTC program was established. However, many slaves and free Black Americans fought in the Civil War and joined the Union Army. This brought out just the need for equality within military for African Americans, and it really pushed for ROTC programs to be offered to Black Americans, especially in schools, which is why we now have an ROTC program here at Prairie View. And then World War I, obviously, in 1918, in November that year is when World War I ended, but earlier that year, the Army ROTC program at Prairie View was established. This was just because President Wilson had expanded war efforts to all college campuses, which included Prairie View A&M, as it was a public HBCU in Texas. World War II incited the need for expansion efforts for the war as the number of soldiers were increased, especially with a new branch of Naval ROTC added to not only Prairie View but also hundreds of other colleges. And this took place in 1968, which, even though it was after World War II, World War II is the main reason why we have a Naval ROTC, as the Navy was one of the bigger branches at the time during the war. And then lastly, we have the Vietnam War, which increased the need of soldiers due to President Reagan really pushing and outreaching and incentivizing different ROTC programs through tuition payment and monetized earnings, paying for food and housing, and etc. So we have some important figures here at Prairie View that not only graduated through our ROTC program, but just have a background in military in general. Many of these people came back to Prairie View to end up being the president or principal of the university, or a dean of a college, or even the dean of the ROTC. And on the left here, we have Dr. Alvin I. Thomas, who ended up being one of the presidents of the ROTC program, who was a military general himself. So here we have 7 different important figures. The first is Lieutenant General Julius W. Beckton Jr. He was the 5th president of Prairie View A&M. I think he's really important because he actually graduated through the ROTC program and was an alumni of Prairie View before he came back after doing active duty and becoming the president here. And then we just talked about Dr. Alvin I. Thomas, who was the third president of Prairie View. He's also very important because he took his prior military experience and really applied it to expand and grow our ROTC program to where it is today. Third, we have Frank Jackson. He was not a president or principal of the university. However, he was the former mayor of Prairie View, Texas, and he ended up graduating through the ROTC program to come back and be the mayor after serving active duty. Fourth, we have Major General Dr. Charles A. Hines. He was the sixth president of Prairie View A&M. He served in the military for 38 years before he ended up becoming the president of the university. And then on the bottom left, we have Shawn Gross. She was the first female battalion commander here at Prairie View in 1978, which is very impressive because that's about 20 to 30 years after women were even allowed to be in the ROTC program at all in Prairie View. And then we have Captain Francis Brady. He was the first naval ROTC professor. He ended up teaching the Golden 13, which is the first class of naval ROTC cadets to graduate from Prairie View after the naval ROTC program was introduced. And these cadets went on to be some of the greatest military leaders and just graduated with an overall impressive military background. And then lastly, we have Colonel Wes Alexander Hamilton. He was the first Army ROTC professor when the program first began. He taught from 1942 on and had an exponential increase on the growth of the ROTC program and military tactics curriculum. So next we have just a historic timeline from the beginning of the Civil War to 1979 when the Vietnam War ends. And from 1861 to 1865 we have the Civil War. And then a couple years after that, in 1876, Prairie View A&M University was established. However, at the time it was called Alta Vista Agriculture and Mechanical College for Colored Youth. 2 years after the college was established, military courses were added to the curriculum as it was given a land grant for doing so. It was called the Morrill Land Grant. And in 1914, World War I started. 4 years later, as it was ending, the Army ROTC was introduced. And then we have a large time gap where the Army ROTC really just expanded. It had the Sabre girls who traveled around the world and performed for different military groups. Within the U.S. military, we had the ROTC band who played at Labor Day performances and football games. And then you had just the growth within the honor societies within the ROTC program. And then in 1939 is when it regains focus more on the military side rather than the educational side as World War II started. And then in 1945, World War II ended. Quickly after that, in 1950s, women were allowed to join the ROTC at Prairie View as it was women's roles in the world really increased during World War II. In 1955, the Vietnam War begins. It wasn't until the middle of the Vietnam War in 1968 when the Naval ROTC and Marines was introduced to Prairie View. And then quickly later after that, 1975, Vietnam War ends. And then next, I have my interviews, which will be showed after this. And the interviews I conducted were with faculty and staff of the ROTC program as I wanted to connect my research of the past to the current president of the ROTC program, as I believe that there's no better way to understand what you're researching than seeing how it's currently being affected in the real world now. So a lot of these people are just going to explain their knowledge on any history, if they're even being taught history of the ROTC program, as well as any current experiences they're having, as both some are military active duty coming back to be a student or faculty member, or just currently going through the ROTC program or on the rate of graduating, as well as any plans they have for after they finish.
Name and then your rank within the ROTC program.
My name is Daniel Collins. I'm Captain United States Marine Corps. I serve as the MOI, the Marine Officer Instructor at the Prairie View and Rice ROTC, in ROTC.
Okay, and then as an instructor, can you kind of explain what you're teaching here on campus?
Sure. Primarily for the school, I have two classes, the Evolution of Warfare and Fundamentals of Maneuver Warfare. So with the Evolution of Warfare, we essentially go from sticks and stones to the future, but it's with the idea of shaping it for decision making going forward. So to understand history as it will apply to us going forward, and then during that class, we do what's called tactical decision games. And so we put them on the spot and we say, well, now you landed at the Battle of Marathon. What are you going to do, General? And so we begin to also shape that leadership, decisiveness, decision-making abilities. So the first part of the class is shaped by giving them some basic doctrine on how to do warfare, and then how to teach and how to learn, because it's a human enterprise. And so they've got to be good at working and teaching and training. And then that kind of, by the end of the semester, we're at the future of warfare, which is a great big question mark. And in the end, we come to the conclusion that knowledge, education is the only thing that can prepare us for the future. You can train for the past because you know it, but you educate for the future. The other class is Fundamentals of Maneuver Warfare, and that one is solely focused on how we fight wars and how we think about fighting wars, how we engage in something, right? Like I don't want to stand there and throw punches with someone. That doesn't sound fun at all.
No, it doesn't.
I don't want to get punched in the face. So can I stop this before it begins? Is that, do they have a critical vulnerability that will end the war or in the battle? Do they have an unprotected supply line where we can just get them to give up and we can move on? Is it social? Is it political? And then again, we'll go back to the decision-making games and we'll be like, okay, here's your magical scenario. What are you going to do about it? And so the leadership and the decision-making is probably even heavier inside of that classroom than with Evolution of Warfare.
Okay. And so as an instructor, can you kind of give us like a background of what you were before an instructor? Were you active duty, or did you go through an ROTC program yourself?
So I am 20 years of active duty. This will be my final assignment. I did about half of that time as enlisted, and then I went through a commissioning program similar to the one that Prairie View has, except I did mine at Texas A&M. And then I became an officer and have been doing that for the last 8 years. On the enlisted side, I worked with small arms and I taught the Marine Corps' version of martial arts. And then eventually I was picked up for the officer program, which is just almost identical to what we had at Texas A&M. You've got going at Prairie View, which you have going across all the nation. And then as an officer, I became a aviation supply, and then I went back to my roots for a little bit. I served at the School of Infantry as a company commander, and then to here.
Okay, and then what are some achievements that a student could have received within the ROTC program?
We have achievements all over the place. We have ribbons that they are awarded with their uniform, and they can get it for outstanding performance academically. So we've got a 3.5 to 3.7, a 3.7 to 3.9, and a 3.9 and up. There's physical awards, there's volunteer events, there's drill competitions, and some extracurriculars that are centered around military activities like that they can kind of build up their wealth of knowledge, and then they get ribbons to go along with it. We also have outside entities, Prairie View alumni, some just international officer groups that look to provide scholarships for those who are doing great things or have the potential to do great things. So we try to bring in some financial incentives on the back end. We don't put those in front of them like, hey, if you do good, you could get some money. The goal is that's more of just a surprise. Hey, as a rewarding effort, we've been talking to this group. They think you're pretty awesome. And then we hold an awards ceremony at the end of the year. And then those organizations typically come out and present them with from swords to books to money to little fancy sheets of paper.
And then my last question for you is, are you aware of any of the history that the PVROTC program here has?
So just in general, like I'm not a big history buff despite the classes I teach. I know that when the Navy wanted to start a HBCU affiliation with the NROTC, they started here. And I know that this program at one point was huge. And I don't know what they were doing back then that we're not doing today, but they've commissioned several admirals, a ton of very successful officers, and even as recently as 5 or 7 years ago, the Prairie View Battalion was 50 people, I think.
And your rank and your full name for me.
Yes, for sure. Within the ROTC, first and foremost, my name is Larry Harleston. Within ROTC, I am a squad leader, which is equivalent to an E6 in the actual Army.
Right now, you are in the ROTC program, and you came from being active. And can you just kind of explain to us why you chose PV's ROTC program specifically? If it was rotation, scholarship, or just the program?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I heard a lot about not the ROTC program, but I heard a lot about the university. I heard from prior alumni, like they love the university. I wanted to personally embed myself into that culture. I wanted to attend the HBCU versus I did have some other options to go to like PWIs and so on and so forth. But me, I wanted to really just feel that experience that, prior alumni just told me about. So
Yeah, definitely. And being told by prior alumni and knowing the culture that an HBCU would be able to give you, did you have any prior knowledge of the history of the ROTC program, or did you just come in just?
yeah, pretty much it was just coming to hit the ground running. But I would say something that fascinated me about the ROTC program is when I first entered the doors, it's like a monument, of African Americans, and they're all, they're all commissioned officers and they're generals. So seeing that is for sure motivating to see that. So aside from that, that's the only culture that I know about the ROTC program.
Okay, so would you please tell us your first and last name?
My name is Desiree Mumfrey.
Okay, and then can you tell us what your rank is here at the PVROTC?
I am an MS1 and I'm in the Army National Guard.
Okay, and what made you come to PV? If it was like the university, the ROTC program, what drew you in?
Prairie View was actually my first choice school, so I'm a transfer student. I wanted to go here before my community college, which is McLennan in Waco. And I love the culture. I love the dance team here. I really loved everything about this school. And the ROTC program was really the cherry on top because they take care of their students. They offer scholarships. A lot of great benefits come with joining their program.
Being in the ROTC program here at PV, there's different programs that I've researched, and being on the Army side, of you said, what is like a after graduation plan for you?
Whenever I graduate, I'm actually going to commission in as an officer. So that is my main goal.
So your main goal is to go straight into active duty?
Yes.
So does that look like enlisting or going to a specific camp? Because I know for the naval side, based on some of the research I've done, they have like the Air Flight Academy in Pensacola that they send you to after you're done graduating here. And then the Marines also have their academy that they go to. So would that look like you going from PV to an academy, or would that look more of like you just going into an enlistment office?
Well, the way that the Army National Guard works is really throughout the different summers through the school year, you'll go to basic camp and you'll go to basic training, and then you'll go be sent off to a school, and that's really it. You can enlist in as an officer as soon as you graduate.
Just a personal question for you, as you're probably one of the only women that I was able to contact in the ROTC. How is being a woman in the ROTC program here at PV? Do you feel your experience is different than maybe a man's experience here?
So far, our experiences have been the same, but it is different because I was in athletics my entire life, and athletics has always been divided. Men and women are separate, but in ROTC, we run together, we work out together, and you notice how much stronger and faster they are, and it's honestly very motivational. But so far there hasn't been too many differences. Like, I haven't been treated differently. So far it's been the same. They're really all about equality in ROTC as well.
My name is Omar Barola. I am in the Naval ROTC program as a Marine option.
So, do you have a rank?
Yes, so I'm a first class, and my position is the midshipman XO. So basically what that means is I'm a senior first class, and then my position XO just means that I'm second in command.
Okay, and so what are you studying here at Prairie View?
My major is criminal justice.
Okay, so do you know any of the history of the ROTC program at PV?
Yeah, I know that for a fact that we're actually the first HBCU to have a Naval ROTC program. There's a little bit more I know Army, so it started off with Army for a while, and then we started somewhere in the 1900s, we got a Naval ROTC program, and we call them the Golden 13, which is the first class of graduates from that Naval ROTC program. So yeah, it's a good amount of history.
Next would be, what are your own personal goals after completing the ROTC program once you graduate and everything? So a lot of the research I've seen is that we have flight aviation trainings, and you mentioned that you're in the Marines, so just give me an insight of what your personal goal is for the future.
Yeah, so actually all of my classmates want to be pilots. I'm different. I don't want to be a pilot. I'm cool with flying, but I'm good. So after you graduate, you go to a 6-month school called TBS, the basic school. Once you finish up there, you pick your MOS, which is your job. My job, ultimately, my goal would be infantry. So that's going to look a lot different from your pilot's pipeline. So pilots, they go to TBS, and then they go to Pensacola, Florida, and they take flight school. As far as infantry goes, you'll probably go to North Carolina. And then as far as goals go, my contract is an 8-year contract where I have to serve at least 5 years active. You can choose those last 3 years to be reserve or active. It's up to you. And then you're up for renewal again after those 8 years. So if I wanted to stay in, I'd stay in and make a career out of it. If I wanted to just do my 5 years and go FBI or CIA, I could do that too.
As the first episode ends for PVAMU Knows podcast, final thoughts for me would just be that I connect with the ROTC program as a military kid growing up and living on base and always being surrounded by the military life. I've always been fascinated by it, and I am so excited to dive deeper into it. I've learned so much about the history and how that history motivates the students and faculty in today's current program to really just push them to become better, higher ranked officers, the next cadets that go into the flight aviation program and Marine camps and boot camp, and commission officers. The ROTC program here is not as big as it was because of outside factors, but it still produces very productive Panthers. And I want to thank all of my interviewees for being completely honest with me throughout the entire process and helping me understand how the history and the important people here at Prairie View are helping shape the future into something so much greater.